You sit across from the first attorney with your hands folded in your lap, and she doesn't ask about your marriage. She asks about your assets, and the answer takes 4 seconds because there aren't many. A joint checking account with $2,300 in it. A car loan still $8,000 underwater. No house. No retirement account worth mentioning. She looks at you the way people look at a form they already know how to fill out. Level 1. Nothing worth splitting. Her name is Delphine Cho, and she's polite, professional, and visibly unbothered by your case, because your case will take 3 hours of her time and settle itself. There's no house to appraise, no business to value, no retirement account requiring a specialist to divide. She quotes you a flat fee, $1,200, and tells you the paperwork will likely be finalized within 90 days. You ask what happens to the $2,300 in the joint account. She says, without looking up, split it in half, or don't bother fighting over it. It costs more to argue than it's worth. This is the level where divorce is administrative, not adversarial. Nobody circles anything. Nobody hides anything, because there's nothing worth the effort of hiding. The system treats you efficiently, almost kindly, because efficient is cheap and you have nothing that requires anything else. The first rule, at 0, the law doesn't protect you or punish you. It just processes you. Level 2, $85,000. You are 33 now, 4 years after that first divorce, remarried, and sitting in a different office with a different attorney. Because this time there's a house, $310,000, with $92,000 in equity, a joint savings account with $18,000, and 2 retirement accounts that together hold roughly $60,000. Suddenly, the conversation changes shape entirely. Your attorney this time, a man named Foster Reyes, spends the first 20 minutes not asking about your marriage, but asking about the house, whose name is on the deed. Who made the down payment, whether any of it came from an inheritance, because inherited money sometimes stays separate property, and separate property is the first thing every divorce attorney at this level learns to hunt for. You didn't know that distinction existed 4 years ago. Now it's the entire conversation. The flat fee disappears at this level. Foster charges $375 an hour, and within the first month you've spent $2,100 just establishing what belongs to whom. Your spouse's attorney sends a letter requesting documentation of the down payment source. You spend a weekend digging through 6-year-old bank statements to prove $14,000 came from your savings before the marriage, not joint funds during it. Nobody warned you that protecting $14,000 would cost you 11 hours of your own life and roughly $600 in legal fees to document. The second rule, once there's a house, the divorce stops being about the relationship and starts being about paper trails. Nobody kept carefully enough at the time. Level 3, $340,000. You are 38. The house has appreciated to $460,000. There's a retirement account now worth $190,000. A small joint investment account with $85,000. And for the first time, a disagreement about a car that isn't really about the car. It's about who gets to keep something that feels like winning. Your attorney now works at a firm with 3 partners and a paralegal dedicated entirely to your file. Her name is Marisol Aguirre, and she doesn't waste time being warm. In the first meeting, she tells you plainly that at this asset level, the other side's attorney will likely request a full financial disclosure, meaning every account, every card, every hidden Venmo balance gets pulled into daylight. You didn't realize a $340 balance in an old account you forgot about would need to be reported. But it does, because at this level, omission looks like concealment, and concealment costs far more than the $340 was ever worth. This is the level where the retirement account becomes its own small war. Dividing it requires something called a QDARO, a Qualified Domestic Relations Order, a legal document that costs $700 to draft, and ensures the split doesn't trigger early withdrawal penalties. Nobody explained retirement accounts needed their own specialized paperwork to divorce properly. You learn it exists only because Marisol mentions it in passing. The way people mention things, they've explained hundreds of times before. The billable hours climb. $9,400 total by the time the case settles, split roughly evenly with your spouse's legal fees on the other side, meaning the total cost of untangling $340. 000 in shared life came to nearly $19,000 combined. Money that technically belonged to both of you and now belongs to neither. The third rule: the more there is to divide, the more the process itself becomes an asset quietly consumed by the people paid to divide everything else. Level 4. $1.2 million. You are 44. This time, there's the house, now worth $580,000, a second property, a rental generating $2,100 a month, a business you co-own with your spouse, valued somewhere between $400,000 and $650,000 depending on which appraiser you believe, and retirement accounts totaling $310,000. The attorney's office you walk into now doesn't feel like a law firm. It feels like a financial institution that happens to also handle paperwork. Your attorney, Bertrand Okafor, doesn't ask about your feelings at all in the first meeting. He asks who your business's accountant is, whether the business has ever been formally appraised, and whether you and your spouse signed anything resembling a buy-sell agreement when you started it together. You didn't. Almost nobody does when a business starts as two people and a shared dream instead of two people and a contingency plan. This is the level where a forensic accountant enters the story. Someone hired specifically to determine what the business is actually worth, separate from what either spouse claims it's worth. The forensic accountant costs $12,000. The business appraisal costs another $8,500. Your spouse hires a competing appraiser, because at this level, both sides distrust a single number enough to pay for a second opinion, and the two numbers, predictably, land $180,000 apart. You spend 4 months in depositions, discovery requests, and mediated negotiations that increasingly feel less like ending a marriage and more like dissolving a small company. Because that's essentially what's happening. The final legal bill lands at $61,000, an amount that would have been unthinkable to you at 33, standing in Foster's office, worrying about $14,000 and a down payment. The fourth rule: past a certain point, divorce stops being about who did what during the marriage and becomes about who can afford to prove their version of the numbers longest. Level 5. $6.5 million. You are 52. This is the level where the process barely resembles the one you experienced at 33 at all. There's the primary residence, worth $1.4 million, a vacation property, 2 commercial rental buildings generating combined income of $340,000 a year, a diversified investment portfolio exceeding $2.8 million, and a family trust established 11 years earlier, that both attorneys spend the first month simply trying to interpret. At this level, you don't hire one attorney. The lead attorney, Vivienne Castellanos, charges $850 an hour and treats the case less like a legal dispute and more like a corporate restructuring, which, functionally, it is. Everything moves slower and more carefully here, because the stakes of a mistake are no longer thousands of dollars, but hundreds of thousands. A single miscalculation on how the trust is taxed upon division could cost either side $200,000 or more. Nobody rushes anything. Meetings are scheduled weeks apart, specifically to avoid decisions made under pressure, because pressure at this level is measured in 6 figures per error. The commercial properties require their own appraisals, their own income projections, their own negotiation over whether to sell or divide the revenue streams going forward. You spend 14 months in this process, not because the marriage was more complicated emotionally than it was at $340,000, but because untangling $6.5 million requires more hands, more specialists, and more time to model every version of fair before anyone agrees on one. The final legal and advisory costs exceed $210,000 combined between both parties, an amount larger than the entire net worth you were dividing back at level 2. And yet, relative to $6.5 million, it barely registers as a percentage. What would have bankrupted you at 33 is, at 52, simply the cost of doing this carefully. The fifth rule: at the top of this ladder, the legal system stops treating you like someone ending a marriage and starts treating you like an institution requiring careful, expensive dismantling. You think back sometimes to Delphine Cho's office, the 4 seconds it took to list your assets, the flat fee, the 90-day timeline. You didn't know then that the speed of that process was a form of mercy, that having nothing worth splitting meant the system moved through you gently, without appraisers, without forensic accountants, without 14 months of careful modeling. Somewhere right now, someone is sitting in an attorney's office with $2,300 in a joint account, relieved at how simple the paperwork sounds. Somewhere else, someone is sitting across from a specialist team, watching a trust get modeled 6 different ways, realizing that the marriage ended months ago. But the process of proving what it was worth is only beginning. The law never changes what it's protecting. It only changes how carefully it protects it, and that carefulness is always quietly for sale.